Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
And welcome to this edition of Indie Beacon Radio. This is your host, b-alan-bourgeois. I am with Joan Foor today, who has written several books in a wide variety of items. I first learned Joan a few years ago when she was working on It's Tough Growing Up. She had revised it. Since then, she's written some others. In background, because it was not a traditional writer's background, you actually have been a nurse and in the military for many years. So let's start there. What got you into that aspect?
Well, I took a few writing courses at UCLA in the evening, and I took this up more or less as a hobby, but I wanted to write a story about my mother's life, and so I worked. It was in my mind for a number of years, and I finally put it on paper.
And so prior to actually putting it on paper, that's where you were working on your other stories that you had done. It's Tough Growing Up, Homeward Journey.
Right.
Marked Women is
right.
the one you're referring to.
Yes.
So why did it take you so long to get to that point of getting that one done and doing the others in between?
Oh, that's very interesting. I think mainly because I was with a critique group, and the interest was children's books at that time, and I also wanted to do this memoir for my brother for a number of years, so I more or less got those out of the way, and then it cleared me to begin to work on this, the story of my mother's life that was in my mind for a number of years, like 30 years, and I just wanted to write it down. It's a story that needs to be told.
And to that aspect, it is a very interesting story because it is about a woman who basically, as you put it, it was betrayed by her husband and put into an asylum.
Exactly.
So how did that come out?
It came out, I mean, as to the true
process.
story or the process? The process was definitely a catharsis for me. It took me a couple of years, about 7 years, writing part-time while I was working as an educator at the college. So it took me about 7 years to finish it. And once again, it was a catharsis for me to get this written because it had worried me that nobody really knew what happened to my mother.
Okay. So without giving away the story, tell me more about it. I mean, it is an interesting aspect because, like we stated, she was betrayed by her husband and put in an asylum, and that's pretty dramatic in itself. So I'm curious to know why and how and all the fun stuff.
That's it. And so the book starts out really with her in the asylum, and then she goes back through her life as to she didn't understand who she was betrayed by and why she was locked away. And then she goes through her entire life of during the Depression, World War II, and the hardships she had at that time, and the 23 years of what she considered to be a pretty good marriage. And she didn't know why he betrayed her.
So when she was put away, you were already there and you ended up living with your father, or what? Yes.
I was a teenager at the time, and I had no influence over my father as far as trying to stop him from doing this. He felt that they were going to help her there. At least in his mind, he thought that was the best place for her was the Pennsylvania State Hospital, but unfortunately it was not.
It only made things worse.
Exactly. And there's a twist to the story. There's suspense there, and there are many reasons. There were other reasons why, he actually didn't know how to care for her and didn't know what to do with her. And so he told the doctor she was crazy. And in those days, it was really a case of misdiagnosis because they didn't require a psychiatrist to interview a patient before they admitted them to a state institution in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. And that actually is one of the reasons why there was such uproar over the way the state mental systems were and why there was so much change, because of that aspect of not needing a doctor's review. Is that right?
Exactly. It just took a family doctor, and any spouse could tell their family doctor, well, I don't get along with my wife or my husband, and they could just put them away for life.
And especially at that time, it was very easy for a husband to do that because even then, which is hard to believe, it's only 60 years ago, that women were still considered secondary and a man could do whatever he wanted in that respect.
You're absolutely right, Alan. That's the case. And it took them, when she was in the institution, it took them 7 years to come up with a diagnosis.
And so much had happened for you personally.
Yeah, and by that time, she was so ill from being in there and receiving shock treatments, ECT, and they put them in ice baths in those times. At that time, they thought they could shock their minds and bring them out of whatever they were supposed to be having problems with, whether it was bipolar or whatever it was, but they didn't even know what they were treating her for.
And for you being as a teenager during all of this, it must have been very dramatic for you to be going through. Were there other siblings involved?
Yes, my brother, but unfortunately he was in the Air Force at the time, so I was alone with my father, and no matter what I told my father what they were doing to her, he said, well, you're not in the medical profession. They're doing what's best for her. And I tried to impress upon him that they were torturing her. And she probably did really. Go ahead.
No, finish.
And so really basically she ended up totally despondent and she fought at first trying to get out, and she couldn't get out. She couldn't escape. And I went to see her every other day. I was her only contact with the outside world, other than a few other visitors occasionally, but they didn't really want to go and see her in the state institution. They thought everybody was crazy in there.
And which is understandable at that point in time, but it's false information. Right. So I'm curious then, because going through this and being around all those medical aspects as a teenager, is this what drove you into being a nurse?
Not really. I really thought that I didn't want to become a nurse because it bothered me of my frustrations of trying to get her out of there and trying to say, they weren't really helping her. And I thought I wouldn't want to go into the medical field, but as time went on, I realized that, they needed nurses in the Viet Nam era. And so I went down and enlisted in the Army because I felt that I needed to help my country.
Sure. So that brings an interesting aspect of your story. Here you've gone through this with your mom, and I'm sure you saw a lot of other people going through this as well. So for you to write this book as being a cathartic aspect, getting out the demons from you and stuff, was there another valuable reason for writing it?
Yes, I believe, I just wanted to kind of educate people as to what took place in the Depression and what took place in World War II and how people in central Pennsylvania were affected by the war and through the Depression. And then, of course, that led me into what really happened to my mother later on. But I think so many of our young people and a lot of others don't really know what happened in the 50s in the state institutions. They are really not that up to date with the hardships that people had to put up with during the Depression and World War II.
Okay, so you get a bit of basic understanding and background information about that time period while also then sharing the information.
Right. And sharing her story. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Excuse me. Do you plan on doing any type of follow-up with this, or is this pretty much it for this particular subject?
Well, my readers have asked me what happened to all the characters. They want to know more, and I've thought about doing another book concerning what happened to everybody, what happened to her in the end, what happened to my father, and to let them know how it all ended.
Cool. Is this one that you're currently working on or a different one?
No, I'm working on another book of my trip through Europe on a motorcycle back in the 60s.
Okay. We will save that for part 2, and we'll come back and talk more about that because it sounds interesting. In the meantime, I want to briefly touch upon Homeward Journey.
All right.
This is an interesting little story. It's about Huntington's disease. Tell me more.
Yes, it is. It's a story about my brother's life. He had Huntington's disease, and as he was walking with a cane across the street in the Hollywood area, he was hit by a hit-and-run driver, and then he remained in a coma for almost 5 years. And while he was in the coma, realizing that usually the last sense to happen to really that a person in a coma has is usually the hearing sense. And so I kept telling him, well, I'm going to take all the poetry you wrote during your lifetime and put it in a book form. And I kept telling them that every time I went to visit him over this period of almost 5 years. And finally he passed away, and then I said I must do this. So it took me a year to put all those poems in chronological order and put it into a book form.
Okay. And proceeds go to the Huntington Disease Society of America, correct?
Yes. As a matter of fact, they still sell that book on their website, and I go to the conventions whenever I can, and I sell Homeward Journey still, even after all this time. I think I first had that independently published about 2003, I believe.
Wonderful. So a great little collection for people to do good by enjoying poetry at the same time.
Yes, and he wrote some traditional poems that were well received by everybody. There's some poems in there for everybody.
Well, this is a perfect opportunity for us to stop our first segment, take a brief break, and then we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Do you love to read great new ebooks? Visit ebg247.com. Be the first to discover the next bestseller. At ebg247, we have the web's largest selection of great new book reads, from that amazing new fiction or nonfiction to horror, romance, and fantasy. We even have today's best children's books. That's ebg247.com. New books arrive daily, and all ebooks start at just 99 cents. If you love to read, then you'll love ebg247.com. Low prices, large selection, and an easy-to-use website. It's all only at ebg247.com.
After his mother is murdered, teenager Scott Harold with feisty new girlfriend Jessie uncover an illegitimate past that leads them to the Oval Office. Will they reach the president before the killer gets to them? Identity Check, a thriller by author Rich Allen, available in print or Kindle at Amazon.com.
Texas Authors is proud to be a supporter of IndieBeacon.com, a website that supports indie authors from around the world. If you are looking for help with marketing or getting published, IndieBeacon.com can assist you. Years of experience by the founder is available to any indie author looking for help. IndieBeacon.com, a place for creative souls to find help in marketing their creations. Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
And welcome back. This is your host, b-alan-bourgeois. You are listening to Indie Beacon Radio, and we have with us Joan Foor. We were talking previously with Joan about her newest book, A Marked Woman, which is an interesting story about her mother and how she was betrayed by her husband and put into an asylum. You can find this book and all of her books on Amazon as well as on your local bookstores. And do you have a website, Joan, that people can find you at?
Yes, I do. It's www.amarkedwoman.com.
Okay, great. And you have another book that's been out for a while. It's called It's Tough Growing Up. It is considered for young kids, middle school to high school age. Is that correct? To about 15 years. Okay. And it's still available on. I'm pretty sure it's still available with. Let's see, iUniverse. Okay. And It's Tough Growing Up. Children's Stories is of courage, helping people to understand how hardships determine much of who they are and how they deal with life. Give us a good example.
Well, a good example is bullying, which is very, very common today. And so many children don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do. And many times they don't share it with anybody of what's happening. And so at the end of each story, if I had a story in there about bullying, I would say at the end, well, what would you do if this happened to you? I would have a question there to try to get the reader involved as to how they could handle it.
And is it also interactive with teachers or librarians or anybody else?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I donated a book to every library in Antelope Valley. I had the superintendent of schools there was very helpful in having me meet with the Teachers Association, and then I donated a book to all the libraries.
Wonderful. And do you plan on doing an updated version with today's social media or anything of that nature?
Well, people have asked me, why don't you republish the book? Although there were several authors involved with this book, because we really started it out in a critique book, and we had everybody submit like an anthology, all these stories, and there were there were quite a number of stories in the book, from smoking to bullying to various different things that every teenager or every young person goes through.
Great. It would be nice to see a current, more updated version, because as you know, we have traveled so much in just the last 5-10 years that I've known you, that I'm sure there's a lot of good information that could be added into it to help students this time around. We have a few minutes
Absolutely.
left. And you mentioned that you took a motorcycle ride through Europe. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
So you're writing a book about that.
Yes. It was about 53 years ago, and I rode 10,000 miles by motor scooter, which, of course, this motor scooter was a very large one. It was a German one. It was as big as a Harley and as heavy as a Harley. And I wanted to see Europe, and so I went to Europe, and I spent 5 months riding this motorcycle everywhere from Germany, down to North Africa, up into Portugal, all the major European countries.
Now, this sounds like it was in the 70s. Is that correct?
No, it was it was around 1964, and that was when the Berlin Wall was still up, and I went over to see East Berlin at the time.
Interesting. So, just for our listeners to get a better sense of this, and to make sure I'm seeing this correctly, here is a young lady who's a nurse, who's in the military, going on a trip in Europe on a motorcycle by herself. Is that correct?
That's correct, but this was before I went into nursing and into the Army. This was when I was younger. I was 28 at the time.
So even more of an interesting aspect for the story because you haven't really learned military tricks or self-defense or anything like this, or more formal education in some respects, and I'm sure you did do college during that time. So, I mean, this really must have been an exciting trip that you took on so many levels.
It was the most exciting trip I had, I think, in my lifetime, and I've traveled a lot in the years that have followed, but this was the most exciting trip I ever took. I felt the most free that I ever did because prior to that time, I had worked a regular job and never got more than 2 weeks vacation at a time. So
here you were for 5 months traveling around Europe.
Until my money ran out. I took every cent that I had saved for 10 years and spent it all and came back to the United States with nothing more than $100.
Wow. So how long can we wait, or do we have to wait to be able to read this adventure?
I think it's going to take me about the rest of the year to finish it.
Okay. Is there ways that people can sign up to keep on your mailing list to keep up to date on the progress, or little tidbits you want to share with them, or anything of that nature?
I really am not into too much as far as blogging or anything like that, but certainly I will put it on Facebook whenever I finish the book, and also on my website.
Okay, and go ahead and let people know what your website is again.
It's www.amarkedwoman.com, all lowercase.
And is that the same for your Facebook, A Marked Woman, or is there a different Facebook page?
It's the same, amarkedwoman.com, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so you've got this, what sounds like a really wonderful story being written right now of that trip. What other projects are you contemplating or have in the back of your mind?
Well, I really think I should write a sequel to A Marked Woman because I've had nothing but positive remarks and everyone curious as to what happened to my mother and my father and my brother, and they really want to know. So that would probably be my next project.
Okay. You have a lot going on with your years of experience in writing, because it does cover pretty much about 15 years worth. Do you have any words of wisdom for somebody who wants to become a writer?
Well, my advice would be, if you're figuring on making a lot of money writing or as being an author, probably will not happen, although some people do become very successful. But I find that it's very difficult to really make a living as a writer, and that's why I'm glad that I can be retired and have a regular income and do this as a hobby.
That is absolutely true on so many levels. Out of the over 1 million authors in the United States, less than it's just like 0.75%. I mean, it's less than 1% are really earning good income where they can self-sustain off that. So a lot of us, including myself, have to work other jobs to be able to continue to do what we so much enjoy doing, which is sharing stories with people and stuff. So I fully agree
correct.
with what you said.
That's absolutely correct. But it is great to see your writing get out there and people read and get back with you, and it's a good feeling to know that they've enjoyed the book.
It is. It definitely is. And to that, just so our listeners know, because we're running out of time here, Joan does have several books. One of them is called It's Tough Growing Up, which is great for middle school and elementary school kids. The other one is Homeward Journey, which is a collection of poetry that benefits the, the Huntington's Disease Society of America. So definitely encourage people to purchase that. And then her newest book, which is A Marked Woman, is a fascinating story about how her mother was betrayed by her father and was put into an asylum, and what went on and how the family, the whole gamut deals with that, and all these things related to that. And then you have your new book that you're working on, which is about your trip in Europe on a motorcycle for 5 months in the 60s, which I tell you has got to be exciting and totally different than if you were to do it now. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with on that one. And with that, we thank you very much for being on our show, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much, Alan. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website at indiebeacon.com.